Welcome back, everybody, to more from the SAbleyes. I'm here today with Jordan. How are we doing, Jordan?
Very well, thank you.
That is good, and we're here to take a look at a deck that took World Championships by storm. That is Gardevoir and Sylveon Tag Team GX. This particular deck wasn't one that people planned for, but it was certainly one that people had success with.
It certainly is. It's a card that I think a lot of people were expecting to do decently well when it first came out, but it kind of got outclassed by some of the other tag team Pokemon, such as Reshizard and Pigrom, of course. But at Worlds, when people weren't really expecting it, it came out of nowhere, did really well on day one, did decently well at day two as well. And it's all because it has quite a lot of bulky attributes with those Fairy Charms.
It certainly does, and the card itself is pretty self-sustaining. You're able to utilize this particular Pokemon without having to worry about having anything else in the list. There are some decks that play with the Mismagius engine. The deck that we have got to profile today doesn't have Mismagius. Instead, it focuses on a purely greens build with a kind of a one-of Tech Xerneas GX, but we'll get to that in a second. The reason that we can make that choice is because Gardevoir and Sylveon is a completely self-sustaining Pokemon. Its first attack, Fairy Song, searches for Fairy Energy and attaches them to the bench in any way that we like, and then Kaleidostorm does 150 and moves energy around the board however we like it to. So if we're able to, we can Kaleidostorm, do 150, which is a pretty solid hit into pretty much everything, move energy around, so if our Guardy is about to get knocked out, we can remove that energy from the active, or even put more energy on in order to use Magical Miracle GX, which does 200 damage. And if there's an extra 3 energy, then your opponent shuffles their hand into their deck, which can be essentially game-ending for some decks if they have to shuffle their hand in. Overall, 3 really strong attacks, and with 260 HP, it's hard to knock this guy out in one shot.
Yeah, just like the other top tag team Pokemon, this Pokemon is very powerful if it ever gets 6 energy into play for that big GX attack. You're not going to see it quite as often as the other decks, obviously, because Reshizard and Pigrom have a little bit of a better energy acceleration method than Gardevoir and Sylveon does, but to be fair, Fairy Song isn't a bad energy accelerator. You're going to be using that on the first or second turn of the game almost every game, and Kaleidostorm is going to keep your energy in play, so it's not even that unrealistic to pull off a big Magical Miracle GX, and if your opponent isn't ready for it, it can just win the game.
Certainly can, and like you were saying, it doesn't necessarily have the same acceleration as those other 2 tag teams, but once the energy is play, it's very easy to keep them there. Our other Pokemon, we're only running 5. Our other Pokemon is a one-of copy of Xerneas GX from Forbidden Light. This card is pretty old, but it's in the deck because it's got a couple of kind of interesting attacks that you can utilize. Obviously, Aura Horns, if you have to, can do 120 in a pinch. It can kind of skew the prize trade a little bit as well, so force your opponent to take 3 knockouts. But it's probably in the deck mainly for its GX attack. We were talking about how bulky Gardevoir Sylveon is, and Sanctuary GX can move all damage counters from each of your Pokemon onto your opponent's active. So maybe 2 or 3 of your Guardies are damaged. Xerneas GX can come in off of a Kaleidostorm, Sanctuary GX remove all of the damage from the field, and take a big one-shot on whatever has been attacking into you.
It's such an insane GX attack. If you told me there was a GX attack which basically took a guaranteed 1-hit KO on your opponent's active Pokemon and healed all damage off of your board for just 3 energy on a basic Pokemon, I would think that was a pretty insane attack, and that's basically what Xerneas GX does in this deck. There's a lot of switching cards in this deck to be able to move between Gardevoir and Sylveon using both Tag, Switch, and Kaleidostorm. You can move between attackers with relative ease, so getting into a position where you've got multiple half-hit Gardevoirs and then being able to switch into the Xerneas GX for Sanctuary is not that unrealistic to do, and if you can pull it off at the right time, it'll almost definitely be the swinging turn of the game.
It certainly will, and that's probably going to be the GX attack we're going to try and pull off. Obviously, if we can get a Magical Miracle going, then we might try to, but Xerneas GX is probably going to be our go-to. When it comes to supporters, this deck is built around the Greens engine, so we're going to be using Greens Exploration in the early game to try and set up our hand. Because we have no Pokemon with abilities, we barely have any Pokemon at all, Greens is going to be super powerful, and it's going to help us get into things like our other supporters, as well as some of those one-of Faerie charms you were mentioning before.
Yeah, it's really important to be able to find greens. You're usually going to be seeing players chain greens in this deck, where you search for one card plus a second greens exploration for the next turn, because just having a greens in your hand at all time means you're very versatile. You can find yourself some healing options or some defensive options with those tools, or you can just go for some aggressive options with, say, Reset Stamp and a switch or a tag switch. So any turn that you have greens in your hand, you can pretty much pull off any play that you want to in this deck, as long as you have energy on board, and most of the time you're going to have energy on board.
That is 100% correct. The other supporter that we've got multiple copies of is Coach Trainer. With this deck, we're always, or effectively always, going to have a tag team in the active, and we usually want to hang on to the cards that we have in our hand. We're normally searching them out with greens. So Coach Trainer draws 4 cards, adds those extra cards to our hand if we don't necessarily need anything, and it's going to be able to just give us that little bit of an insurance policy just in case we want to hold something for the next turn.
And if we didn't already have enough synergy with Custom Catcher for greens, then Coach Trainer is also very synergetic with Custom Catcher, being able to draw extra cards and potentially hold one Custom Catcher looking for a second one. It's very easy to find those combo pieces when you've got either greens or Coach Trainer. Just keep filling your hand up more and more, and eventually find the pieces you need to make some big swing turns.
Yeah, certainly will. And another card that will help us find those custom catches, like you mentioned, is Bill's Analysis. We can look at the top 7 cards of our deck and find two trainer cards and put them into our hand. This is kind of greens light, so we're not going to be able to look through the whole deck, but we'll be able to take whatever trainer card we want. Just to add that extra little bit of consistency, we're going to be able to take a look through, find things off of the top, and then get going with our greens or our Coach Trainer a little later on.
This is really just a way for the deck builder to say, I want to play 6 greens exploration. I'm not allowed to, so I'm going to have to settle for 4 and 2 Bill's Analysis. It's not quite as good, but it gets the job done. So if you ever feel like 4 greens isn't enough, adding a couple Bill's Analysis to your list is going to make it a little bit easier for you.
Yeah, it's going to give you that added consistency. Our final supporter is a one-of copy of Mina. This is going to allow us to search our deck for a Faerie energy and attach it to one of our Pokemon. This means that if our Gardevoir in the active has only got 1 energy attached to it, we can potentially attach 2 energy in a turn and Kaleidostorm if we find ourselves in a position where we can't switch. It just means that you've got an out to an attack that isn't Faerie Song on your second attacking turn if you don't want to use it. So you're going to be able to attack if you've found this Mina and if you've got the energy in hand.
This is a very powerful card for if you want to go aggressive first. If you go second, then you don't really need it, because you can just attack on your first turn with Faerie Song to get your energy onto the board. But if you're going first, you can try and use your greens exploration on the first turn to find yourself a Mina for second turn, and then all you need is energy attachment and the Mina, of course, and you can start pulling off Kaleidostorm from turn 2 onwards. So a very aggressive card that's just in there for the one-offs for those times where you do want to get that turn 2 attack off.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to the items now. I will start with Pokemon Search. This deck has 4 copies of Cherish Ball and 4 copies of Pokemon Communication. It's interesting that it's got 4 Pokemon Communication in the deck, considering there are only 5 Pokemon in the list. But it is important that we find the right ones at the right time, and giving ourselves the most consistency to get all of our Gardevoirs out as quickly as possible is going to be the key. Pokecoms is obviously quite good as well to find Xerneas GX if you've used all your Cherish Balls already, but this is a very thick Pokemon search line, considering there are not a huge amount of Pokemon in the deck.
Oh, there are more Pokemon search cards in the deck than there are Pokemon, which is not very often that you see that. Cherish Ball effectively reads search your deck for a Pokemon as well, so seeing an additional 4 search cards on top of this is surprising to see, but it does make sense when you think about the fact that if you ever have just one Pokemon in play and no Pokemon on your bench, then Faerie Song on the second turn or on the first turn if you're going second, is a dead attack. You can't use it if you have no bench Pokemon, so you really do desperately need to make sure you have a second Pokemon in play by the second turn of the game, or even usually by the first turn of the game. So it makes sense that they're playing it extra safe by having all these consistency search cards.
That is 100% correct. When it comes to consistency search as well, we also have one copy of Energy Spinner. This is a really strong card, especially since we're playing greens. We can greens for Energy Spinner on turn 1 and then grab 3 energy into our hand. It means that we're never going to be wanting any extra energy in our hand for attachments. We're going to have them effectively the entire game, and even in the late game or mid game when you need that extra attachment, you can greens for it and grab it. The fact that you're able to find it off of pretty much all of your supporters, just to give you that extra outdoor energy, is actually really strong.
Well, yeah, the fact that this deck isn't playing something like a Viridian Forest or any way to search for energy off of a Stadium card, it makes sense to play Energy Spinner so that all of your cards that search for trainers can now turn into energy, which is a very useful thing to be able to do. Sometimes an energy card is the only thing you need, and if you've already played a supporter, then Mina's not going to be quite enough, and Energy Spinner can potentially get you 3, so it's not bad.
It's pretty strong. We play 4 copies of Custom Catcher, like we mentioned before. We want to be able to gust out specific Pokemon in order to take knockouts. The good thing about Gardevoir is we're going to be able to attack pretty consistently. We just want to make sure that we're attacking into the right Pokemon. So Custom Catcher is going to be our gust of choice in this deck. But we don't really need to talk about that too much because every deck runs Custom Catcher at the moment. We have 2 copies of Great Potion in order to heal some damage. I'd really like to see some more, but with our Xerneas GX's Sanctuary, we're actually not in a great need of potions throughout the game. 1 or 2 is probably pretty strong, and then we can just Sanctuary GX any excess damage off of some of our Gardevoirs in order to clean our board up. So 2 is probably going to get the job done just to make that maths a little bit more awkward for decks like Malamar that are hitting 130 and exact numbers for half hits.
Yeah, it's definitely a very powerful card against Malamar. The 130 damage from Giratina plus a spell tag for 40 damage is still just shy of the 2-hit KO if you play a single Great Potion. So you're really going to force them to overcommit to knocking out Gardevoir Sylveons, maybe using Mimikyu or Distortion Door to take you out. In other matchups, though, it's not a super important card, which is why there's only 2 copies of it. Against decks like Picrom, ideally they're not going to be able to attack you at all anyway because of your Fairy Charms. And then decks like Reshizard or Mewtwo are often going to be able to take a 1-hit KO if they want to anyway. So the Great Potion, very powerful in certain matchups, but limited use in others.
Yeah, exactly. We have 2 copies of Reset Stamp. Reset Stamp is going to be very strong for us, especially if we do have our Xerneas GX knocked out as well. We could potentially stamp our opponent down to 3 or even 1 card, and that is going to make it very, very difficult for them to take big one-shots. If they can't one-shot a Gardevoir Sylveon, they're going to struggle to take a knockout. So the more we can do to stop them from taking those knockouts, the better off we will be. So 2 stamp, probably pretty strong.
Especially with all these disruptive cards that you can play, all the tools you can put in your Pokemon, which we'll talk about very shortly, make it even more punishing when your opponent gets stamped to a low hand and can't deal with it.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. You mentioned it before, we've got 4 copies of Switch. We want to be able to switch in and out of our Gardevoir Sylveon. We don't want to leave one in the active to get knocked out. And after we've switched it, we can use one of our 3 copies of Tag Switch to move any excess energy from our Gardevoir Sylveon on the bench onto one in the active, or even from our Gardevoir Sylveon onto a Xerneas GX in order to use Sanctuary GX. Tag Switch as a 3 count in this deck is really, really strong because you're moving energy all the time, and it gives you that bit of insurance. It means you don't need to have perfect Collider Storms all the time, or you can give yourself the option just in case something happens that you weren't expecting.
With the 4 copies of Switch and 3 copies of Tag Switch, you can very easily search for both of these cards at the same time with Green's Exploration or Field's Analysis or any of those trainer searching cards. You've got plenty of options to be able to switch all of your Pokemon and energy around as much as you like. And that basically is going to allow you to pull off whatever your attack you want to use every turn of the game once you've set up.
Certainly will. Before we get into the item, the tool cards, which are very important, we'll quickly look at the stadiums. We've got 4 copies of Power Plant and 1 copy of Wondrous Labyrinth in this list. That's 5 stadiums, and 4 of them are designed to stop things like Dedenne GX and Mewtwo Mew from running rampant over this deck. What we want to do is we want to limit our opponent's options, and if they cannot use the Dedenne, then they are going to probably struggle, especially with things like Ability Reshizard using Heatran and the Dedenne to get their kind of engines going. And obviously the World Championship winning list, Mew Mew, is going to struggle against Power Plant, let alone 4 of them. So you're probably going to have a pretty strong matchup there if you're able to keep those stadiums in play.
Power Plant is such a strong stadium in this format, and Gardevoir Sylveon, with its disruptive abilities and reset stamp, is really, really strong against decks like Mewtwo or Pikarom, which really struggle to deal with these stadiums if you can stamp them at the right time. And most importantly, you want to have a high stadium count to be able to take care of one of the most annoying cards of this deck being Lysander Labs, which a lot of Pikarom players tended to opt for at the World Championships after seeing how well Gardevoir did.
Yes, certainly did, and obviously Wondrous Labyrinth can potentially lock your opponent out for attacking for a turn if they don't have the extra energy or they can't replace the stadium. It means that you might be able to buy yourself a turn just to get that extra 150 damage into play, particularly strong in the late game once you know your opponent has run through most of their stadiums. Obviously, it's a passive stadium. Your opponent's going to be able to remove it, they're going to have the chance to remove it, but when it sticks, especially if it sticks for multiple turns, it's going to be super, super good.
It's especially strong in some of the matchups, like the stall matchups we were seeing, like the one that made top 8 at Worlds with Oranguru. If you can knock out their Oranguru and play Wondrous Labyrinth in the same turn, they're really going to struggle to find another resource management, and just cutting them off of resource management for one turn could be the difference between them winning or losing the game. So it's a very powerful card in a lot of different matchups.
Certainly is. Alright, this is the section of the deck that makes or breaks it. This is the tool cards. We have 1 copy of Choice Helmet. This is our generic anti-GX stuff. Sometimes we come up against Pokemon that don't fit into our Fairy Charms, and so Choice Helmet can help reduce damage from those attackers. Things like a Heatran that would normally attack for 130 now is only attacking for 100, so that's pretty strong. And there's plenty of other utilizations for this particular card. It's just one of those ones where you won't know them until you see them.
Yeah, one of the biggest uses for this card that comes to my mind at least is against the Dark Box matchup. Gardevoir Sylveon and Xerneas both have Dark resistance, so if you check a Choice Helmet onto either of these Pokemon, you're going to be taking 50 less damage from all of their Dark-type GX Pokemon. So if you think about something like Darkrai and Umbreon, they're going to be using Black Lance for only 100 damage, which is a pretty significant difference.
That is, it's 1/3 of the damage they're not doing. And the Fairy Charms is where it's at. We've got 2 copies of the Lightning Fairy Charm. Obviously, if you're expecting Pikarom to be a little bit smaller, then maybe you could change these charms up. But since Pikarom is so popular, I've opted for 2 copies of this card here. 2 Fairy Charms means that this matchup is effectively over, especially if Pikarom cannot get into Lysander Labs or doesn't play it. Fairy Charm is going to win you that game, and if it doesn't win you the game, then it's at least going to buy you plenty of turns to Kaleidostorm and take some big knockouts.
This is probably the main reason, this specific card is the main reason that people were so hyped up about Gardevoir at the World Championships. Just having a free win against some Pikarom was, considering it was probably the biggest deck at the tournament, is such a huge deal. And the reason why 2 is so important, not only for prizing purposes, but because Pikarom is sometimes playing that Lysander Lab Stadium card. With only 1 Fairy Charm, it's pretty easy for them to just play the Lysander Labs, use their GX attack to knock out your Fairy Charm, and then the game's going to be pretty over for you. But if you're running a second copy, even if they do play Lysander Labs, they're still going to struggle to knock out a second Gardevoir if you replace their stadium every turn.
It certainly will. We've got 2 more. One of them is the Fairy Charm Psychic, and this is an interesting one that not many people were really considering going into the World Championships, but Fairy Charm Psychic actually prevents an attack from one of the Pokemon that Gardevoir Sylveon really struggles against, and that's Espeon Deoxys. You wouldn't think that it's such a powerful attacker in this matchup, but Espeon Deoxys is able to half-hit a Gardevoir Sylveon whilst not getting knocked out by it, and that's something that Malamar really needs in this particular matchup. And Fairy Charm Psychic means that, hey, you're not going to be able to do that. You can't attack with Espeon Deoxys anymore, and it also means that you're going to prevent damage from that pesky Mew Mew.
Yeah, it's specifically good in that Malamar matchup. I know my game matchup was to use Espeon Deoxys, to use Psychic Club, take a half hit and survive, and then set up the win condition after using Psychic Club to take my last prizes with the GX attack. But you can't I mean, you can still use the GX attack, but you can't use Psychic Club, which is the main reason why this card is played over the Ability Fairy Charm, where you would usually think the Ability Fairy Charm would be played instead to block Mewtwo, but that added benefit against Malamar makes the Psychic one just a little bit better.
Just that tiny little bit better. Obviously, we can't stress enough that obviously it does block Mew Mew, okay? We're not forgetting it. But it's just we have personal experience losing to this particular Fairy Charm at World Championships. Well, at least I do, Jordan. I don't know about you.
I certainly do.
But hey, and we also have one copy of Fairy Charm UB. This is going to prevent damage done by Ultra Beasts. So, Blacephalon, bad luck, mate. You're not going to be able to do any big damage to our Gardevoirs. And also, Ultra Necrozma in Ultra Malamar. You're going to have a bit of a tough time as well. And you'll find when these decks don't have access to their big attackers, they're really going to struggle to attack into you for any meaningful damage.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world for Ultra Necrozma. It definitely sucks a lot for it, especially since it already has Wingless to Faerie. But Malamar decks can get away with just using Giratina in some games, but it really is just a super hard counter to Blacephalon. They're not going to be able to win the game using just Naganos. They definitely need Blacephalon to at least take out one big knockout, and if you use Fairy Charm at the right time, they're really going to struggle to take all 6 prizes.
They certainly will. We've rounded out the deck with 10 copies of Fairy Energy. In the last couple of videos, Jordan, I've forgotten to mention the energy counts, so I'll have to remember to do that. But hey, it's a pretty strong list. We will see. Why is it coming up with a little triangle there? Oh, I've forgotten to do the thing. I forgot to save it. Whoops, that's okay.
Wrong artwork.
But hey, it's a really, really strong deck that is saw quite a lot of success, so hopefully we can see some success with it on the ladder as well. I'm glad that I noticed that now and wasn't desperately searching for it whilst the Versus ladder was up. But yeah, obviously we're looking for things like Pikarom or Reshizard, or well, maybe not Reshizard, but Pikarom is going to be the big one. Malamar would be happy to see, Mew Mew would be happy to see, Blacephalon we're happy to see. Lots of decks we have a pretty strong matchup against, so hopefully we can come against one of them now.
Well, yeah, when you think about this deck, it's really built to have good answers against almost everything except for Reshizard. So if you're expecting to go into a field without Reshizard, it's a very strong play.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we're loading into the game here. Panic stations. Panic stations. I'm trying to concede. We're gonna have to fill in this dead time, Jordan, with some more witty and insightful conversation. This is horrific. Has PTCG ever? This is like real life. It's like I'm playing Gardevoir. Okay.
I was about to say, this is just like as if we've had Reshizard. You just sit down against your opponent, you pack up, and you leave.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how that matchup goes if your opponent's able to set up. In fact, we did actually see that matchup play out in the finals of the World Championships in seniors, I believe. It was Gardevoir versus Reshizard, and while the Gardevoir player did put up a pretty decent fight, Reshizard was just too powerful and was able to get the 2-0 victory there.
I can't even quit out. I'm trying to concede. Let me out.
This is terrible.
Let me out. No. Well, this is
might have to refresh the app.
This is high quality content. I don't want to. I don't know what's going to happen. All right.
I don't want to either, but okay. I'm running out of options here.
All right. Bear with us. This is called Thinking on Our Feet. Here we go. You've seen some high quality black screen here. Loading in, loading in, loading in, loading in.
Minor technical issues here.
It's okay. And now you're seeing my login. Beautiful. Okay. All right. We're coming back to it now. If we were intelligent, Jordan, we could simply cut this bit out. But it's actually more work for me, and it's much less. My time is so invaluable that I'd rather sit here and just talk about it rather than actually go through and cut it up. Because if I have to cut the footage, then essentially what happens is it adds like 45 minutes onto my like video upload schedule.
Well, let's avoid that then.
Yeah, well, it's okay. And we're into a game here, which is pretty strong. We will we'll see whether we actually get to play it though. Oh, look at that! A coin flip has happened. A coin flip has happened. The game is back on. Okay, that was
exciting time.
That was
only minor setback.
That was 3 minutes.
That's getting repaired.
3 minutes of exceptional content, and hey, we actually found a Gardevoir in our opening hand, which is super
repair
good.
In round 1. We managed to get a basic Pokemon in our first opening hand. It's pretty good times.
The tournament is afoot. And yeah, we're probably only going to get one game in here, even if we didn't have that technical difficulty, because Gardevoir is typically a game that takes a long time to play against. And it's pretty easy to see what this first hand's going to be. I reckon we just Coach Trainer. There is an argument we could Bills here, but I think
the Coach Trainer is stronger.
Yeah, I think we just grab it. There's another Gardevoir there. We'll just chuck that down, and that's our turn. It's my favourite thing. There's not a lot of thinking going on.
Only downside to that turn is we don't get the opportunity to find a Mina for turn 2 if we choose to go for a turn 2 knockout, but that's not the end of the world. I think we'll be more than happy to just settle for Faerie Song on the second turn. It's just one less option we kind of have for this second turn.
Yeah, exactly. Our opponent opting for Professor Elm here, so we will see what we're playing. Looks like it's Spiritomb, which is going to be quite interesting. One of these kind of one prize attacker big damage decks. We'll see what happens. Power Plant coming down. It's obviously not going to affect us at all, apart from the fact that we won't be able to play down 4 of our Power Plants ourselves, but that's okay.
And I guess this is another really strong thing about Gardevoir Sylveon is the fact that no one's really countering it that hard. I mean, you see a couple cards here or there that are kind of targeted to deal with Gardevoir Sylveon, such as that Lysander Lab. But when you see a deck like this, they've got a whole bunch of non-GX attackers like Spiritombs, Hoopers, Frostlass, Buzzwole sometimes, all targeting these big decks. Nobody's really playing any cards that target Gardevoir Sylveon.
Yeah, exactly. The irony is that the only Pokemon in this deck that will likely be able to hit for weakness on our Gardevoir Sylveon is actually Jirachi, but they're obviously not going to be attacking with them, so we should be A-OK here. And we've got a reasonably strong hand. I mean, we'll Bill's Analysis and we'll see what we can grab. We'll probably grab a Greens here, and I'm not sure, maybe a Cherish Ball to grab another Gardevoir Sylveon might be strong.
Cherish Ball or Tag Switch seem like the 2 best options, but
I think
we'll go the Greens.
We'll go with Cherish Ball, I guess.
Yeah, the Greens means that we can change our mind and get whatever card we want next turn instead anyway. So
well, there's a part of me that kind of wants to go for the Coach Trainer because we don't realistically need to grab the Cherish Ball here.
Yeah, but we can always Greens for it next turn if we choose to do so.
We certainly can, and we're going to have 2 Gardevoir with 2 energy on it after this turn if we choose to, or we could even just chuck the 3 on the bench. But I think it's probably stronger to just go like this. Faerie Song, chuck a couple of energy onto the bench, and now we've got 2 Gardevoir that are effectively powered up for the rest of the game.
Seems good to me. I mean, this is what we aim to do turn 2 every game with this deck. We have 2 Tag Team GXs ready to go. They're relatively bulky, and I don't think our opponent's deck is going to really be able to apply too much pressure to us. I'd say it's going to be pretty tough for them to even get reliable 2-hit KOs thanks to the resistance on that Spiritomb.
Yeah, so it is interesting because obviously Spiritomb, Anguish Cry, when they get up to big numbers, when they got 5 damage counters on them, they're going to be able to do 160 plus whatever the Hustle Belt does. What's that? 240. Yeah. But yeah, it's not going to be enough to get that 1-hit KO, and I don't think Frostlass is going to be able to get there either. So they're always going to be half-hitting. And if we're able to just chain our attackers around, we should be in a pretty solid position.
This definitely seems like a game where if we are able to pull off that GX attack from Xerneas GX at the right time, there's no way our opponent will be able to build up enough damage again to take knockouts before we inevitably win the game. So our opponent's really going to have to apply a lot of pressure. It seems like they're pretty happy to just go straight into the Frostlass and start dealing some damage before we get an attack off.
Yeah, that's fine by me. I mean, we can just switch into this Gardevoir Sylveon on the bench, which is fresh, and hit into it with an attack. We'll also probably Coach Trainer. I don't think we realistically need to do anything else.
It's pretty strong to hold onto the Greens for when we really need it.
Yeah, now we've got 2 in hand as well. And we can just Collider Storm here. Take a knockout on this Frostlass. We might choose to move 1 energy down here just for fun.
And what's good is it's pretty much impossible for our opponent to... In fact, it probably is impossible for our opponent to knock out this active Gardevoir and Sylveon. So, in theory, if we wanted to, we could have even gone all in and put all of the energy onto the active, getting ready for that GX attack from Gardevoir. But as we said before, the Xerneas is much more important in this matchup, and our opponent has Jirachi anyway, so...
Yeah, exactly.
They're probably going to be more out of it.
If we were looking at a deck that didn't have Jirachi, then we might have considered going for the Magical Miracle on the next turn, but, I mean, our opponent's got 2 cards in hand, and they're not necessarily threatening us too much. The strongest play that we can make next turn is possibly just attacking with Xerneas if we get the opportunity to. We've got the tag switch and the greens, which means we're going to be able to find it. We've got a switch, but they're going to reset stamp us here probably, but that's okay. We'll probably get into all the cards we need anyway. It's not a massive issue.
It is a pretty decent combo of cards we need if we do want to go for that attack from Xerneas GX. We would need an energy, a tag switch, and of course the Xerneas.
That's painful.
And well, they actually get a custom catcher on the off of the Sylveon. That's pretty lucky.
That is pretty strong, but that's okay. That's going to be fine. We're going to be able to take out a Rainbow Energy here because we've actually managed to find ourselves a Mina, which is pretty strong. So even if we can't get an energy off of the top deck here, we are going to be able to at least utilize it. Or we might just chuck down this Gardevoir here as well, and we'll use the Cherish Ball. I'm probably going to hunt out this Xerneas now. Whether or not we start powering it up is another question, but it's definitely worth having access to.
And if we want to, we can even burn those Pokemon communications so that we can use Custom Catcher to draw cards. Depends on if we value the Custom Catcher or if we think we need to draw cards right now. We could just hold on to it, but right now I think we could either just draw cards or honestly just attack. There's nothing else we really need to do right now.
I think we might try and draw some cards because I mean we're never realistically going to want to gust anything. We're pretty much just going to want to kill whatever comes into the active. And
yeah, that's what I was.
The only thing that we can really fall prey to is a potential stamp to a low hand size and a brick. So I might even just chuck down this Xerneas here and draw for 3. That's okay. That seems fine.
Didn't get an energy attachment, but we get to fin out our final Gardevoir Sylveon GX. Pretty nice. We could even chuck down that Faerie charm just to thin it away if we want to. It's not that big a deal. I don't even know which type it was, to be honest.
That was the Psychic one. We'll use Collider Storm here. Now, part of me wants to move all 3 of these energy onto the one of the Gardevoirs on the bench, just because we've got the switch. That way we don't lose a Gardevoir or an energy at the moment, which is the most important thing.
Yep, I agree with that.
So we'll chuck all that down there, and worst case scenario, we can just switch into the Guardy on the bench, and we've got an energy in hand now as well, so we'll see how we go. And funnily enough, Xerneas GX's first attack Overrun could potentially come in real clutch in this matchup because one of the side effects of Spiritomb is that they need to put a ton of damage on themselves. So we could potentially, if we find a double custom catcher, take 2 prizes now that Spiritomb's up to 40 damage on it. So maybe it would have been worth holding on to it, but that's okay. We'll wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I think it was probably correct. I mean, it's only ever going to be worth using Overrun if they have 2 Spiritombs that both have 40 damage or more on them. So right now they do have 1 to be fair, but I think the chance of them having 2 on the board at once is fairly low. One of us will probably win the game before that happens.
That's probably true. And Jirachi finding really another custom here.
Yeah, we really want to find another draw supporter really soon because we're going to want to switch into that Xerneas GX sooner rather than later. Make sure that they're not able to get another cheeky double custom for their last 3 prizes. We really want to try and get that GX attack to heal and then force them to knock out the Xerneas and go down to 1 prize. And we actually top deck the tags.
We could go for it if we'd like to. Do you reckon it's worth going just for the Sanctuary now?
I think the fact that we know there's a custom catcher in their hand makes it just a little too scary, knowing that they could just win the game if we don't heal that damage right now. So this is really strong because not only does it allow us to heal the damage from the Gardevoir, but it also puts a 2-prize Pokemon in the active, which we can take a prize every turn with Aurora Horns. Not the attack you thought we'd be using too often. And until they take the knockout, we basically just get to sit here and attack forever because we don't care if they take the knockout, they'll just go to 1 prize.
Yeah, exactly. We could potentially be in a bit of trouble if we don't draw out of this hand though, because we are eventually going to need to find something.
Yeah, we hopefully just get a few energy over the next few turns to power up another Gardevoir Sylveon, but worst case scenario, we could just Faerie Song and then use that tag switch in our hand to get another attack. By the time this Xerneas GX goes down, hopefully we'll be down to 1 prize card, so just 1 attack from Gardevoir Sylveon might be enough to win the game.
And it looks like they might be giving us Viridian Forest access here. Depends on how they feel. They've got it in their hand, they decide not to give it to us. It's nasty boys. That's okay. Xerneas obviously taking a hit here. It's going to be able to take another knockout. We're going to go down to 2 prizes. But we've not really got anything in hand, so we're just going to Aurora Horns and we'll hope for the best.
Yep, the Xerneas GX is almost surely going to go down on this turn, so our opponent will be down to 1 prize. We're probably going to be forced to use Faerie Song. It's going to be a tight finish. I think it'll possibly come down to whether we're able to find Great Potions, but we have been drawing really badly off of that reset stand. If we can find any draw supporter, I think we'll be able to find the casters again.
Yeah, greens would really turn this this game around right here, but we still need to take 2 knockouts. The question is, are they going to be able to take them before we can? The fact that they've got Jirachi means that they've got a little bit more consistency going for them, but they need to play down the Viridian Forest to search out Dark Energy if they don't have one in hand. And that's going to be a real positive for us. We can discard the Cherish Ball or the Power Plant and start getting some more energy into play.
And as I mentioned, we do have the option of using Faerie Song plus Tag Switch to at least take 1 more prize card. Whether we'll be able to take 2 is questionable, but it is pretty funny knowing that both of us are 2 knockouts away from winning the game, but our opponent has to work much harder for those KOs.
They certainly do. They are going to need to attack 3 times, theoretically, to get that knockout, whereas we will only need to attack, well, twice, but we need to Faerie Song, so it's going to be about the same amount of time. It just depends on how it all works out in the end. The fact that they've still got that custom catcher in hand is a little bit frightening, though.
Yeah, one of the things that we would, in theory, be able to do is swap between multiple Gardevoirs once we start attacking, force them to find those custom catchers to be able to take a knockout. But knowing that their deck is starting to get a little low now, and they do have access to at least 1 that we know of, means we are going to have to be very careful and try and heal that Gardevoir Sylveon if we are ever given the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, so it's going to be tough. They're going to take the knockout here, go down to 1 prize, and then we're going to be in a bit of a tough situation. But that's okay. It's going to be fine. I'm not concerned.
This is where if we're drawing a little bit better, we'd really be able to take use of those reset stamps. Bring our opponent down to 1 card, have a fresh Gardevoir Sylveon on the active of 260 HP, and basically say, you have 1 or 2 turns to win the game. If you don't get it off of a reset stamp to 1, then I'm just going to take the last prize.
Yeah, exactly. Our opponent's struggling to comprehend the idea that taking prize is what happens after a knockout here. He's taken 1. We'll wait for him to take the 2nd. It's a tough choice. They both look pretty good. Come on, buddy.
You must be really thinking about it.
You can do it. I believe in you. There he goes. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We've been having some real struggles with PTCGO. Alright, well, we've got a switch and a tag switch, so we can use Faerie Song to get ourselves a new Gardevoir next turn, but we still haven't found that stamp. Our opponent is going to need to attack a couple of times to get a knockout, though, so we still have a chance. And the fact that there's still 4 greens in deck means that eventually we have to see one, surely. Yeah,
we have to hope that our opponent isn't able to line up a 2-hit KO on this active Gardevoir, but if they are going to be able to 2-hit KO it, we're really going to want stamp. Just pray our opponent doesn't get double custom catcher off of a stamp to 1 plus a Jirachi. They do actually still need a lot more damage though. Like right now, these Spiritombs are only doing about 100 damage, which after resistance is only 80 on a Gardevoir Sylveon. That isn't even close to a 2-hit KO, so our opponent really needs to find either another attacker, or maybe some Hustle Belts and some more damage counters on these Spiritombs, or they're just not going to be dealing enough damage to even get a 2-hit KO on Gardevoir Sylveon.
Yeah, that is true. And he's probably sitting here thinking, is it worth me putting that extra 10 damage onto the Spiritomb? What if the second Xerneas comes out? Because in reality, if we were to play 2, then that second, that 40th damage counter on the Spiritomb, or not 40th, the 4th damage counter on the Spiritomb would mean that we could win the game. He's going for it here, gambling on the fact that we only have 1. We obviously do only have 1, but this was that turn, Jordan, when we could take the 2 knockouts.
Sure is. And let's say the second Xerneas GX is not super likely for any Gardevoir Sylveon player to run, but a Brox isn't out of the question. Like, I would be surprised to see someone playing Brock in this list, and if we had a Brock right now, we would actually be holding the Cherish Ball to get the Xerneas GX right back into our hand.
Yeah, we'd actually be holding game if the Power Plant was a Brock. But it isn't, so it doesn't matter. Our opponent's really thinking about this here. It's like, oh, do I click Anguish Cry or do I pass?
Well, if they attack with Anguish Cry right now, they're only 3, 6, 9, 12, 110 damage, which is a respectable amount, but it's still not enough for a 2-hit KO if they don't find Hustle Belt next turn. So I guess they're debating whether it's worth putting the Hustle Belt down now and kind of forcing the 2-hit KO, or if it's better to hold on to it and use it on the second Spiritomb. Or maybe they just don't have one. Is that just a pass?
Or maybe they choose to pass.
Fair enough. We actually drew a supporter as well.
That seems pretty weak, that pass.
Yeah, I don't know what they were playing around there. I mean, maybe they just got timed out with bad internet connection or something.
Maybe that potentially could be it. Oh, we could get
The
Oh, hello. Well, they must have been timed out with a bad internet connection.
That seems like the most likely outcome.
And that sums up the entire video on PTCGO. It's just bad internet connections.
But hey, in that game, we did manage to top deck the Bills, which we did actually get the reset stamp, so I'd like to think that even if they did just attack there, we'd have all the cards we needed to play the stamp, switch into a fresh Gardevoir, and we'd probably go on to win the game next turn.
Yeah, exactly. We probably would have got there. But you can see this deck, even though it wasn't going up against one of the decks that it's specifically teched for, with all of its tool cards, it still has enough bulk and enough power to put in a great performance. And we did get to see the power of Sanctuary GX from Xerneas as well. So definitely worth considering if you're heading down to your local league or challenge or cup or something like that, especially if you're expecting a lot of that kind of tag team stuff floating around Mew Mews and Pikaroms specifically.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see two kind of anti-meta decks going up against each other there. I guess it just shows that this deck, compared to Spiritomb, does have just a bit more raw power. It's definitely not a bad deck when it comes to random matchups. It's got a lot of cool tricks it can play. It's not only good against the decks that it's targeted to beat, but when you do verse one of those decks that you're built to beat, you're going to have a pretty good time.
You certainly are. But hey, thanks Jordan for coming along for this one.
Not a problem.
And thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, then consider subscribing by clicking the SAbleye in the middle of the screen. On the left hand side we have some videos that YouTube thinks that you'll like. On the right we have our Unified Minds playlist for more games with terrible internet connections. Hopefully you actually see one finish. That would be great. Thanks everyone for coming along, and we'll see you all next time for more from the SAbleyes. Bye.